welcome to another episode of Integrity Matters by Turnitin. And today I'm very pleased to be joined by Dr. Daniel Barr, who's the Principal Research Integrity Advisor at RMIT University here in Melbourne. Thanks very much for joining us
today,
Dan.
My pleasure.
I'm very happy to see you again. So I know you've been involved in research integrity for a number of years now, but I know also that wasn't what you initially trained as, and your trade was, as it were. You were an immunologist. So can you talk to us a little bit about your path to research integrity, how you ended up there?
Yeah, sure. I describe myself as a non-practicing immunologist. Yeah, I undertook study, a PhD, and then a postdoc looking at immunology and also proteomics. And really the first time I had to think strategically about my career was at the point at which I thought, was I going to do another postdoc in research, or would I look at an alternate career? So we call it a career transition event because most of us expect to be professors, but the reality is quite different. I sought out advice from mentors and supervisors, friends and family, and I ended up going back to something I did during my PhD, which was in research administration. During my PhD, I didn't realize this, but universities have large engine rooms of administration and management for research. And so I went back into there and very quickly found that my passion for research would match very well to the management and promotion of responsible research within the institution. So I've kept my academic bent. I've kept a scholarly approach to the work that I do. So that's informed things that I've done in research integrity, such as make policy or produce support services, education and training, as well as handling potential breaches of research integrity. And I found my research background to be really, really helpful for that, understanding of research and the pressures and other aspects of research cultures.
Great. That's it's a natural progression in some ways, I guess.
Yeah, initially it was a huge shock. Initially, seeking advice from mentors was really helpful, and I found in looking at opportunities for alternate careers once you've done a PhD or even gone into research a bit, I think that research management and administration is actually a genuine one. It's a viable one that would match to lots of different people and personality types and lots of different experiences. So you can work in administrative processes, and if you're from a research background, you then inform how universities support researchers to get grants or to manage post-award matters such as contracts and other things for the work that they want to do. There are other aspects too. People are very passionate about how student researchers, so HDRs and PhD students, are essentially supported and looked after by institutions, and so people from a research background can greatly inform the facilitation of great candidature experiences for students coming through universities. For me, I worked in a couple of different roles in research management. I enjoyed a lot of them, and some of them were a little bit bureaucratic, but I think that sometimes that's the nature of the best way forward for processes. But I think keeping an academic and scholarly bent on things, keeping a researcher focus, certainly helped in my roles in essentially what I'm doing is providing services to researchers.
Yeah. And I think definitely that it's an area that potentially more people should look to go into, right? I mean, I think there's a need for more support and advice for research in general. I think. In general, yeah.
I think so, and I think research ethics and integrity both lend themselves very nicely. Those service areas lend themselves very nicely to having people with research experience in them.
Because it's peers talking to peers. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And if you're advocating for a certain way of doing research, according to principles or according to even rules, having that perception, having that that accord with your colleagues in the research community is very powerful, much more powerful than just writing a policy and putting it on a website.
Definitely, yeah. It needs to be a living thing, right? It needs to be something that people can relate to rather than just something dry, some dry text.
Right. We found it's interesting. I mean, universities are places of higher education, and I think we've experienced that sometimes we're actually not very well versed at how we would educate or train our own people within the institutions. So having a research background, having scholarly approaches to working out problems, to informing things such as education and training, so how you would approach that, pedagogical approaches or assessment of whether things are effective or different modes of training or education. That sort of that critical mindedness, that inventiveness that academics often bring to their challenge, the problems that they're trying to solve, is useful for developing products that are then given to them as a service. I've tried to do that. I've tried to be a good administrator. Sometimes I've had to reflect on legal documents or seek legal advice. So working in research integrity within an institution, it's been fascinating, very rewarding. It's something I didn't expect I would do while I was being an immunologist.
No, imagine, yeah. So I guess that leads on to the next question, which is, I think you're the first research integrity advisor we've spoken to on the show, and I know it's a position I think in most universities now, but certainly not around the whole region for sure. It's in Australia, it's common. Can you just very briefly describe kind of what the role entails? I guess not necessarily on a day-to-day basis, but at a kind of high level.
Yeah, it's a really good invention from the Australian Code for the Responsible Conduct of Research, something that was kept during the latest iteration or revision to the code, which is quite different to the last version. But the research integrity advisors are still there. They look like a really good idea, a really good thing. Research integrity advisors provide advice to anyone within a research community about the responsible conduct of research. Typically, these are people with concerns around the trustworthiness of research or processes or ways of doing research. The questions we get are often, they're quite diverse. But as an advisor, typically at universities, they're experienced researchers who have given extra training and support. So the advice that they can give to advisees is around responsible research practices, but also processes that exist to address concerns. So the ways that we handle or manage potential breaches. So often you'll see them at the front end of a concern or complaint pathway, where you get advice as a person with a concern about the integrity of research. You go to an advisor. They're relatively friendly, they're accessible, good listener, and they provide you sort of information from a trusted source, and then give you the information or the tools you need to then raise a concern, for example, where that's needed. We've also seen that RIAs, research integrity advisors, can provide advice to people who are the respondents to a complaint or an allegation of a breach of integrity. So the RIA can provide advice about how processes work, around procedural fairness, those sort of things.
And are you also involved proactively in terms of education, putting programs in place, ensuring that the university is maintaining and improving standards around integrity? Yeah,
and one of my major roles is to facilitate or help, assist in facilitating the responsible conduct of research and research integrity at RMIT. At the moment, I'm focusing largely on education and training programs such as that. RIAs, or research integrity advisors at other institutions, are typically academics, more focused on research, and so they'll be within a research discipline. And there are different ways, or diverse ways of accessing the great information that they could have or advice that they could have for the whole of institution approach. So some universities are very good at gathering them together and seeking out their advice for strategies to facilitate research integrity, to build environments of responsible research.
You, as well as obviously being a research integrity advisor, very much hands-on, I guess, on the ground, representative within the university, you obviously do an awful lot of research yourself into research integrity and facilitate that, and I know participate in an awful lot of global and regional and local organizations around that. From your experience, what do you think are the most pressing challenges right now in research when it comes to maintaining integrity?
It's actually, that's a really good question. I think that it's actually quite a basic one. It's actually still around awareness and understanding. So one thing we've noticed is that when people within institutions, very well-meaning and well-established researchers or academics, go to articulate what research integrity is, typically they talk about what it isn't. And they'll talk about things that are breaches of research integrity principles. So I think that the understanding of the principles of research integrity and then the active uptake so that those principles are translated into responsible practices to generate an environment of responsible research, I think that's still a really big challenge in research integrity for institutions and researchers that do their great work there within them. There are other more recently articulated or better understood challenges as well. Some of these are around the lack of reproducibility, certainly in certain fields, but some researchers argue that the lack of reproducibility applies to all research, and something that the principles of research integrity can certainly inform to address, so that there's an increase in the apparent reproducibility of work. There's also some strange new things that we're seeing, and I don't know that necessarily that open access is the genesis of predatory journals, but the journals that don't undertake honest, ethical, conscientious publication or dissemination of research, so predatory journals and predatory publishing, looks like a recent phenomenon and has only really been recently well defined by groups of researchers and administrators, specialists focusing on that area. And again, there are approaches to, I think through research integrity, through the principles and their translation or reflection of the principles, to help address, to avoid publishing in predatory journals, or to essentially stamp them out within practices. It's very interesting. I still think we have lots of good ideas, but there's not a lot of evidence. There's actually not a lot of research to tell us what to do, to tell us what the next best thing to do to support or facilitate responsible research is. And so I think that's a definite call out. We need more research into research to do that.
We'll take a quick break and return for the second part of the conversation with Dan around research integrity.